Our QA track at IGDA. My name is Amy Nanto. I'm with BMC, and I'd like to introduce you to our special guest today with Mario Wynand from PikPok, right? So he's gonna give you an idea on what they do at the company, but in general, what they do is actually a game development company in New Zealand. So they focus on cross-platform titles and most recently iOS and Android as well. So I'll pass this time over to you, and he's going to be sharing with us on how they see QA as a developer and what that journey looks like. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I have two company names up there because we're sort of this strange developer that has evolved over time. We're a team of about 95 people at the moment. We formed the company in May of '97, so we've been around for about 14 or so years now. We started out as a console work-for-hire developer under the brand that we have. And set about sort of developing different console games, a smattering of PC games over time, before moving into sort of different platforms, multi-platform development, moving into digital distribution, and then mobile and tablet as well. So we've sort of done a lot of stuff and experienced all the horror areas of game development, working with various publishers, and of course are now working with the great opportunity of digital distribution, where we're taking a lot more control over our own destiny. Starting off, I guess, one of the very first games that we developed was Championship Surfer for PlayStation 1. We've done a lot of sports titles for different consoles, as well as licensed titles based on movies, and more recently sort of working on a lot of mobile and tablet stuff. So as the company has evolved and we moved from one place to another. We started out as this work-for-hire developer. We were doing work-for-hire contracts, the really basic stuff where we had our fee, we had no back-end royalty. Back when we were sort of a team of 5 or 6 people, and moved on to sort of bigger projects, multi-platform development, moved into self-publishing really because we wanted to take control of our own destiny. Very quickly we came to the realization that working with publishers was challenging at the time. We knew that retail was going to face some big issues, and it has since we decided it was going to go that way. So we moved into self-publishing, where we had to take on sort of more responsibility, more liability. We had a lot more control. And we're just starting to move into this place now where we're actually taking on third-party titles to publish as well. And of course, again, that's another layer of responsibility and more challenges for how we evolve our process. So when everything's kind of been changing constantly along the way in terms of the experience that we have, the scale of the team, the scale of the projects that we're on, the number of platforms we're developing for within a particular project or across all projects, as complexity has gone up, as standards have changed, with platform manufacturers and in terms of what consumers expect as well, we've had to evolve all aspects of our studio. And QA is something that has evolved quite rapidly along the way, and has evolved quite far along with that evolving process. So to start at the very beginning, we started out back in very early on. We were doing, as I mentioned, Championship Surfer was one of our first titles. We're doing titles like Barbie Beach Vacation, which was an interesting title for a team of 15 guys at the time to be working on, but they really got into designing the outfits and creating little animals and flowers for Barbie to play with. But these were, pure work for hire titles. We weren't even really involved in the design of them. We were subcontracted to another developer who had the publishing relationship with Mattel, with Ubisoft. And so for us, kind of at that level where we started out, between 5 and 12 people, we didn't really have this concept that we needed to be too responsible for QA. We wanted to make sure that our stuff was solid, but as we went about our business, the developers just tested their own stuff before they checked it in. There wasn't too much testing of our builds before we handed them across, because we knew that QA was being done by this other developer, Chrome Studios, that we were working for, and we knew that there was a publisher on the other end there somewhere as well. Unfortunately, that's not a great solution, because when you are a small team, if you have 4 or 5 programmers on a project, having those programmers spending 20-30% of their time either testing their own stuff as they're integrating it, or trying to replicate bugs that are coming back, that's a really expensive proposition in terms of the resources you have available, and that there's a real tangible cost there. And there's a bit of developer blindness that comes in as well. Programmers don't want to believe that what they've checked in can possibly be wrong a lot of the time. So it's pretty easy for them to kind of check in, what they've done. They test it against what it's supposed to do, and not try and test it to break it. So at the time, even though we got through those projects, we leaned on publishers. We're finding we're wasting a lot of time and in delivering relatively poor quality builds that required a lot of iteration back and forth between us and the publisher. Obviously that wasn't very sustainable as we continued to grow. One of the catalysts that made us really have to think about QA in a more formal way and take on a lot more responsibility was when we started true cross-platform development. And we had a great opportunity, after doing a couple of PC titles and a PlayStation 1 title, to step up with a new sports title on PlayStation 2, Xbox and PC. So around the same time we were moving into multiple projects at once as well. The problem with this particular series of games was the publisher that we were working with, a company called Home Entertainment Suppliers, was relatively new at being a publisher and not a distributor as well. And they had no QA department. They barely had a producer. They didn't really have any development or publishing experience at all, besides distributing other people's peripherals and titles. So this was something where we suddenly had to jump in, and we had to be responsible for the quality of the project. So this was really one of the first opportunities in 2002 where we actually hired full-time QA staff. We set up a little team, and went about our way testing. So as we moved into this new phase, we found that we were catching many more bugs, because obviously with full-time staff testing the whole time, they were finding a lot more issues. Turned out there were a lot more issues than we even expected there to be. We improved the quality of the builds that we were delivering. They were certainly a lot more stable. There wasn't this kind of back and forth where we deliver something and then we hear back the next day that this whole section of the game didn't work properly. So it really did help kind of lift the quality of what we're doing. Though one of the kind of offsetting factors of that was that the games that we were creating were increasingly complex. Starting to do online multiplayer development, working across multiple platforms has its own issues as well. One of the things that we saw come out of this early phase, which we needed to get around, was this kind of us versus them mentality, where once you have a QA team finding bugs and telling developers that their stuff doesn't work or is broken or is wrong in some way, there can be a bit of animosity that builds up that you need to be able to deal with. because there's just a little bit of resentment there that developers seem to have for QA, creating extra work for them. It's perceived as creating more work, even though it's just compelling those developers to do the job right, in the end. One of the other things that we found was that we became very focused on kind of technical functionality, and we started kind of losing a bit of sight on things like accessibility and quality of the overall experience. So while this was great for us kind of lifting our game, we still needed to make some changes in order to continue improving the quality of our software. Usability testing, which is not strictly QA, is something that we layered into our process on top of having this kind of formal testing. Usability testing, if you haven't heard about it, is not testing really for functional correctness, not testing for crashes or TRC issues or compliance issues, whatever it might be. It's really testing for sort of a different layer of stuff. Intuitiveness, comprehension, difficulty curves, and overall accessibility, making sure that people can come into the game and it actually, there's no barriers to entry there. This was something that we felt was kind of important to improve the overall quality of experience, and we felt it was a good way to kind of build off of that QA process that we'd built up in terms of the bug tracking and a way to kind of add this new dimension. One of the important things about usability testing is that test subjects are consumers and not developers, so you can only do usability testing with actual consumers, because developers get too picky. But one of the great opportunities of usability testing is it only takes about 5 or 6 test subjects to reveal about 90% of your top usability issues. So it can be a very effective way of finding a lot of things that are just fundamentally wrong with your game. And also what's good is a lot of these identified issues can be easily fixed. A lot of them are simple control changes, changes in text, changes in loading screen, adding a new message. What that means is that although development teams, again, can get apprehensive early on as you add this sort of process to your overall development cycle, no developer really wants to see their stuff exposed to consumers before it's ready. But actually once you get into the habit of doing that, and you can see that as you iterate these test cycles, you iterate the game, you fix these issues, very, very quickly you can improve the experience that consumers have. So developers come around very quickly to wanting usability to happen because they can create results very quickly. To give you an example, around about 2005 was when we released Grip Shift on PlayStation Portable. So it was a retail game that later we published onto PSN and Live Arcade. But usability testing was first done by us on the PSP version, and we found that had great results because it was quite a hard game to get into, and we really needed to use it to smooth out that kind of learning curve. To give you an example of one of the results we had from usability testing and how easy it can be to improve the experience, one of the things we found was that 100% of males on a particular build, when they went into the game, would skip over the tutorial levels and go straight into the beginner difficulty. The issue with that was if you tried jumping in like that, there was kind of fundamental learning that you missed, and it kind of degraded the experience because you really needed to know about these controls. But of course, us males being males, we don't need to be taught how to play a game, so we just dive straight into the beginner. Well, the way we fixed that was we just renamed tutorials to beginner and kind of changed everything else as well, and that fixed the problem and meant that everybody would jump into the beginner levels, and suddenly the game was better. So that's a simple thing in this simple kind of testing that we do, to kind of raise that quality of experience. As I said, this was kind of something that we layered on top of that formal QA team as we moved into this kind of original IP, and we became more conscious of wanting to make better games because suddenly, we had more of a personal stake in it. It improved the accessibility of all of our titles, made them easier to get into. This is something that we found worked really well for our rugby league games as well, our other sports games, which have a lot of controls. But one of the things, I guess, that usability testing complicated was suddenly, on top of all the complexity, on top of these new features that we had to test for, here was a whole nother set of bugs or tasks that were coming into the development process. And suddenly there were way more tasks that we had to manage. There's an overhead in trying to manage kind of hundreds and hundreds of bugs at one time. And there were challenges in prioritization because suddenly we had to deal with not only these kind of technical issues and compliance issues, but we also had to have these kind of quality focus issues, and we didn't really know how to balance a lot of that stuff. So that actually required us to kind of change our development process, and I guess this is an example of an evolving QA kind of forcing an evolving development methodology. What we moved to from sort of the standard waterfall model was going to a agile-based methodology called Scrum, and I won't go into too much detail here. A lot of you probably know about it already, but basically it kind of breaks down the whole design into sort of more functional, task-orientated components, and it's focused on what are called sprints, which are 4 to 6 weeks at a time, and you focus on a particular set of issues or tasks or functionality, and you front load the most important stuff in the game to the start of the project. So it's kind of about getting to the fun, getting all the key functionality into the game first. It's a highly communicative development process. Teams meet every morning for 15 minutes. They all talk about what they're working on. They're talking about issues they're having. They're talking about what they're working on next, barriers that are impeding them from progressing. So it's a way to kind of focus on the stuff that's important, have the support of your peers around you, be very open and communicative, and really focusing on the game itself and what's important rather than kind of hitting these arbitrary milestones along the way. One of the things that you need to really support that process is very, very good bug tracking, task management software. And again, there's a lot of tracking and reporting that you need to do to properly run an agile-based methodology like Scrum. But we chose to do a custom solution based off of Track, which is a freely available kind of task tracking kind of online intranet-based system. We did a lot of customization over the top of that to essentially turn this into this kind of broad bug reporting, task tracking, prioritization, project tracking, and it was a way really to kind of pull together everything, whether it be a task, a quality issue, a bug issue, all the different workloads that people had into a single reporting tool that will enable all stakeholders in a particular project to be able to quickly go in, assess what's going on, see what's the most important stuff, change priorities if you were if you had that access, and meant that you knew at any given time whether this project was on track or not, and most importantly, how much work you have left to do. That's one of the key advantages of something like Scrum, is that every day people are updating their estimates, and every day you know how early or how late your project is on that particular day. So this was something where our suddenly, we went from kind of having this development process and this list of bugs to having this very kind of integrated process where kind of QA, usability, and the developers all kind of came together under this single tool. So we started doing this again as we're kind of moving more and more into self-publishing. We're needing to take on more responsibility. We're needing, one of the things when you're self-publishing is you don't want projects to go over time. When you're actually paying for development yourself, you become very conscious of every day that you might be running late, and you certainly don't want to bounce when you're submitting things to Sony and Microsoft. So we layered in this development methodology, Scrum. We added this advanced task tracking software, and that really helped us in a lot of ways. It meant that all our critical stuff got implemented early on, and that meant it got the most testing throughout the course of development. And it really helped, I guess, break down that barrier I mentioned before, that sort of, us versus them, QA versus development, where people were taking, developers were taking personal accountability. They weren't able to hide stuff, and became actually more open about asking for help. So rather than slaving away trying to fix something until the day of the deadline when they needed to have it fixed by, and then saying to their lead, actually I need some help on this. People were becoming very supportive. Load balancing was happening a lot better too, so people would actually volunteer to take bugs and tasks off other people, and it really made people much more engaged in the process and really legitimized kind of QA as a function, because it became very important for everybody on the team to know every issue that there was currently with that game at any given time. What we found, though, I guess, is when we started getting into this stuff, is that we were actually leaving a lot of the compliance sort of aspects of our games to the very end. So one of the key things about console development, and we were still doing a lot of this stuff 5 or 6 years ago, is that Sony and Microsoft, Nintendo have very long checklists of stuff that you have to go through when you submit a game. The Microsoft one is thousands of checkboxes long. So they run all these different tests. You need to have the right memory card messages. You need to have the right order of boot screen. You're not allowed to have blank screens for so long. There's all these different things that touch on every aspect of the game, every aspect of the experience. That's one of the things that I think we saw when people started getting into live arcade development across from PC. Is you had developers who were very vocal about these kind of oppressive standards that Sony and Microsoft had, but really that's the way console development had been all along the way. But we were finding, like a lot of developers, that our problem was that it's kind of boring stuff to work on, and it's not particularly challenging. And so what we kind of did was we kind of left it to the end and put junior programmers on it. But it really wasn't until we kind of clicked and thought, well, hang on, Sony or Microsoft is not going to bounce us for having poor gameplay or poor level design or music that isn't so great or whatever it might be, but they will bounce us for having the wrong memory card message in the wrong place. So that was something that we sort of realized, okay, we actually need to do something here and kind of change the game, because we were finding that while QA and that usability and that process was taking care of everything else, stacking all that compliance stuff to the back end of the project was the wrong way to go about it. So what we did was we actually developed a framework for all of our software to be derived from. We call it Stencil, and essentially what it is it's like the empty shell of a house. So it has all of the functionality from a compliance standpoint of what console games or PC games need to be, in terms of having the right messages in the right place, the right flow, the right functionality. the right controller stuff, all the online hooks, the leaderboard hooks, but it doesn't actually have any game in it, and it's not skinned to anything. So we put senior programmers to develop this framework so it was engineered correctly. We actually put it through our test process so it was QA'd regularly. And whenever we would start a new project, we would take this framework and start the new code base on top of that. We actually got Microsoft to agree to run it through their QA process as well, and there was no expectation that once they'd QA'd the framework that we would automatically pass any games that we submitted. But there was a sense that we were starting from a place that was clean and compliant, and we would kind of have to do something wrong along the way to kind of muck up that compliance. And we felt that was a much better approach to trying to cram in and do all the stuff at the last minute. So there's a diagram that's a little bit too complicated, and writing which is far too small, but essentially we have the different platforms we develop on. We were using a lot of middleware on top of that, so whether it was Fire Engine or Gamebryo, different libraries such as Fmod and Bullet. We had our proprietary engine kind of sitting over the top of that, and then this kind of wrapper framework layer that sits over the top of that again. So this was something that we introduced around about when we were working on Shatter PSN PC. It was actually something that we spotted coming out the back of GripShift on PSN. And when we submitted GripShift on Live Arcade to Microsoft at the end of 2000, I think it was, we actually got a note back from their QA that said that game was the cleanest submission that Microsoft had ever seen from any developer, either retail or download. So we're pretty happy with that as being a testament that we were taking the right approach to this sort of thing. So another good step along the way. So again, we added this framework on top of what we were doing before. Also around that time, we added a localization and submissions manager. So it wasn't enough that we just had this new technology that we were leveraging and that we had QA to kind of identify any issues that might come out of it. But we also wanted somebody that was solely responsible for keeping up to date with the different standards that Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo had, as well as somebody who was responsible for learning how to, the actual process, filling out the forms, all that sort of thing along the way. So he's a key person that we added. What this meant was that on top of the benefits that we got before, our submissions to the different platform manufacturers became a lot cleaner. We became a lot faster in developing. We actually shaved a couple of months off our development time. We found that we weren't fixing a lot of these compliance bugs right at the end. We actually got through a number of projects over the next couple of years since we've been using this. I'd say about 80 to 90% of our console game submissions are going through Sony or Microsoft first time rather than needing multiple submissions. But there was a problem. Again, we became very focused on these TRC issues when we already had that focus on functional issues and all these bugs. We had all these bugs and tasks and track. We could manage them all very effectively, but we became very focused on kind of bugs and tasks as individual line items. And what we began to lose sight of was what we were doing in the first place, which was trying to make good games. And we kind of lost sight of the experience. And what happened was we would create this design, and there would be, at the start of the project, and there would be kind of discovery along the way, but there wasn't really any way of tying back the vision of the project back into kind of how we managed tasks, how we managed bugs, how we managed QA. How do we decide, between things that we were going to fix? How do we decide how we're going to fix something? A lot of times there's a way of resolving a bug, that might take more time, but is potentially better for the experience of the game, generally where people become very focused on tasks and individual bugs, the easiest solution is the one that, and the fastest solution is generally the one that wins. So we needed a way to kind of tie back this kind of vision of the project back into this QA management experience. This is a concept that a number of studios use in different ways. We refer to this as using design pillars. So essentially for every project, we set high-level project-specific goals. We generally only have 3, and these are the 3 things that are going to be kind of the fundamental drivers of fun and uniqueness within the project. What that does is when you have these high-level goals, it gives you another dimension to check your prioritization, to check your implementation method, to check what you're going to work on next. It gives you this new dimension to check things against, so it doesn't become just about well, I can fix this quickly, so I'm going to do it this way. You've got to consider what is the overall experience that we want this game to have. These design pillars should be short, open to interpretation, and widely applicable. I'll skip ahead so you can actually see some examples. Basically, you want to create these high-level goals that anybody on the project can interpret in their own way and apply them to their particular discipline. So if somebody's a gameplay programmer, they view these design pillars from the perspective of programming gameplay. If you're a sound designer, you have your own take on them. And again, it's all about making sure that people are just thinking about the experience as they approach the different bugs, the different tasks that they're provided, so that they're really thinking about, keeping that in mind so that they're not compromising the game along the way. They're not sort of ending up in a dead end that's going to kill some aspect of the fun or the quality. So for Madagascar carts, which we did for Activision Minneapolis, started I think January of 2009, and we had 7.5 months to build this kart racer game from scratch on PS3, 360 and Wii, which is not a long time to do a licensed console game, but that's the way that Activision Minneapolis works. So we felt it was really important. We had this vision for the game. We wanted to make sure that we did the best job that we could with the limited resources that we had. It was a budget title. It's a short time frame. We hadn't strictly made a kart racing game before, even though we had some technology that we could leverage. The biggest thing that we were concerned about in this project was not having the quality high enough. Activision Minneapolis doesn't have a lot of stellar games in their portfolio, but around about that time, we needed to take on some of this work to keep the studio around. This was like just after the end of the start of the global financial crisis. So we layered in 3 design pillars, which was having Madagascar humour and personality throughout the game, enjoyable ways for every member of the family to play, and move it. Mad Carts never frustrates your progress. So we ended up being able to embody what we wanted out of the game in terms of making it open to the whole family. We knew that we needed to allow kids to be able to play easily, so there weren't things that stopped you, and it was very easy if you got hit to kind of keep going again and keep moving forward. It's something that we learnt was very important on the Speed Racer project that we did for Warner Brothers. And it just gave us, again, another check to kind of make sure that the experience ended up where we wanted to be, and that it wasn't just about shipping this game on time and on budget. So we ended up doing pretty well with that approach. We actually exceeded our quality benchmark in terms of Game Rankings review scores, which is good for us because we had a bonus clause in there. We actually ended up shipping the game, I think, a cumulative 18 days early, which is quite a significant amount of time when you only had 7.5 months to begin with. But we got thrown that curveball about 2 months into the project that we needed to ship early to hit something. And we actually got through all SKUs through first time with Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. And that's certainly, in large part to Activision Minneapolis does have, quite a strong QA team. They do a lot of titles through that studio, and they have a lot of pull with Sony and Microsoft. But again, because we kind of layered in all of these aspects and all of this consideration into bugs, stability, quality, and compliance on our side, that meant that we had to deal with very few issues by the time we came to the end of the project. And they've managed to sell over 1 million units, which is pretty good, seeing as we haven't done many games that have managed to reach that benchmark. So basically, layering on these design pillars gave us, this new dimension, this new way of prioritizing, this new way of getting people to interpret the bugs that they had, and gave them a new way to think about the tasks that they were given to make sure that they didn't compromise the vision for the game along the way. And that was great. We sort of we were doing what we needed to do. When you're working with Activision, you need to ship on time. They don't want to miss their quarterly report numbers. So you need to ship on time, you need to ship on budget. And we were doing that, and we were shipping solid games. And then we were doing a lot more, around about that time, a lot more self-publishing as well. And self-publishing into the digital space. And I guess one of the things that was a bit of a surprise for us, which really shouldn't have been, was that when you ship into the digital space, it's not over once you ship the game. That's kind of in some ways just the beginning. And with console development, once it's out there, it's out. We've done very few patches on our console games over the years. Normally there's a fixed budget. There's no more budget from the publisher or from our side to patch up any issues that are along the way. And it kind of ends up being what it is when it ships and never changes after that. When we started shipping smartphone games around this time, PC games, and doing our own stuff on PSN, when we started getting that customer support, that customer feedback, we get the emails coming back from people saying lots of things. So this is actually the forum for Shatter on Steam. They have a forum for every game, and there's a whole bunch of different issues that you can see there. The Steam challenge is impossible. Lol, everyone's angry, raging. There should be option to disable animated background. Mouse sensitivity. People having issues with the settings editor. All of the stuff that when you're developing PC games, you have compatibility issues, and suddenly the publisher is not the one that's getting all that feedback. It's all coming back to us. And because these are our games, and because we want to make sure that we have a good communication, good experience, good loyalty with customers, we need to make sure that they're having a good experience, and that we have a way to actually respond to their issues. And if we can't kind of have them work around something, we need to find a way to actually fix the game to improve that experience. So I guess we kind of moved into this new phase over the last few years, where really, as we ramped down our console retail gaming and moving more into not only self-publishing, but we're starting to publish other people's titles, and moving into this more software as a service model, where the game goes out and you might add new content over time. You need to fix bugs, you need to fix compatibility issues. we needed to add the sense of kind of post-launch support and how do we deal with QAing issues or identifying issues, replicating issues, and then how do we actually, once we've identified something, how do we fix something, how do we roll those fixes back out to the consumer. So we layered in kind of this new level of kind of quality sensitivity to our process. We added a full-time community manager, customer support, and have tried to create this process where we're much more conscious of doing updates. We're sort of planning to do updates ahead of time, especially on smartphone, thinking about patches, rolling out patches, and we're doing okay at that at the moment, and certainly we've seen good responses from the customers that we have had where we are actually fixing issues that are getting raised. And there's something really weird that goes on, when you have this customer who gets like really angry about something not working properly. Once you fix it, they seem to become more loyal than the customers who never had that problem in the first place. There's this sort of strange dynamic that develops over time. But we've really increased the loyalty that we have with a lot of our customers. The downside of this is when you actually care about what happens to your game after it goes out there, and if you start caring about your customers and making sure that every customer has the experience as you intended it, it actually creates a lot of work, because suddenly you've got people who are not only testing the live games you have in development, but you're trying to replicate issues that people are having out there in the real world. The other thing, I guess, that this approach has about it is very reactionary rather than being proactive and sort of trying to catch stuff ahead of time. So, sometimes we kind of caught ourselves pushing stuff out and then seeing what the issues are and trying to respond to that rather than, trying to see if we can catch more from the outset. So there's still more that we have to do. We've kind of come a long way. We've layered on these different aspects. We've kind of evolved our process over time. But there's a lot more that we actually need to do that we're already thinking about. One is better hardware coverage, and we're finding even relatively stable platforms like iOS are not really very stable at all in terms of there's new hardware every year. So many different handsets that they have now between the iPhone range and the touch range, and then you have all the different OS versions that people have, and then not everybody upgrades. And that's even before we get onto Android, which is like this whole nother spaghetti monster. So one of the things that we need to do is kind of broaden the hardware coverage that we're getting and making sure that we're testing on more handsets, more OSs, and trying to cover off just making sure that the games at least work as good as they can before we send them out. We need to scale our customer support team, because that team is a team of one right now, and as we release more and more games, we're finding that we're getting a lot more mail, and sometimes the feedback coming back in is easy to deal with because people are saying the game's great, but you don't always get that. You're still having people coming up with issues, and the more games we put out and the more successful that we are, the harder it becomes to deal with that feedback or those issues in a timely manner. And as I mentioned before, it's great when you can fix somebody that's raging about an issue with your game, but if they've emailed you 3 or 4 times already over a couple of months and you still haven't fixed something, then the potential for converting that person into a very loyal customer goes away, and they become the type of customer that will slag off your studio at any given moment. So we need to scale that team to be able to respond to what we're pushing out there. Related to that, we need improved processes and software to deal with customer issue tracking, so that we can effectively kind of get a sense for who is having these issues. Is there a better way that we can identify them once we resolve the issue and push out a patch? How do we notify a large number of people that may have reported the issue? We need a better patch and update strategy. So right now, patches and updates kind of happen by stealing a resource from other projects or waiting until we have some resource free to put onto things. But actually, again, as we have a bigger and bigger portfolio, and we need to make sure we have dedicated people who are responding to issues that people are having. And then trying to get sort of feedback at an even deeper level than the explicit feedback that we're getting from customers. Getting feedback even when the customers don't know that they're giving us feedback. So building a lot more telemetry into our games. So that's something that has become a lot easier with mobile phones, but we're building it into our PC and console games as well, where we can see where people are having issues, we can see what they're playing the most, we can see the error messages that are coming up. So we actually are getting a much broader sense of the experiences and issues that people are having kind of in real time out there in the real world, rather than only kind of hearing the thin layer of the actual feedback that we get back. And responding to that by trying to extrapolate that into what that means for the whole user base. And that's something, you know, that's very important as we move into this very, you know, casual new market where customers are making snap decisions about whether they're going to keep playing a game or not. You know, you need to be able to respond faster than the actual feedback that you're getting back. So I kind of glossed over you know, a bunch of stuff there. I think, you know, the point of my talk was kind of more about explaining how we sort of saw QA evolve and how it became kind of more and more integrated into development over time and actually became kind of part of that development philosophy. So I'm not sure I have any great revelations for this final slide. Oh. Focus group testing is something that we also want to add in as well, again, from a quality perspective. So just some things to think about. You know, for us, and certainly I think for most people, QA should be an integral part of development. It's not the separate function. Certainly you don't want it to be this team that sits on their own and just creates work for your developers. It's also multifaceted. I think, you know, a lot of companies just approach it as finding the bugs, but there's actually opportunities to leverage QA to actually improve the quality of the games beyond just making sure they work as they're intended to work. And once you create that infrastructure, once you create that process, you know, there's small things that you can do that can really enhance the development process. I think hopefully I've shown that you can build up QA in a modular way. You know, when we were a team of 5 or 6 people, we certainly weren't in a position to suddenly plonk down a QA team that had usability and, you know, all this automated stuff and Flash task tracking software and stuff like that. It was something that we could layer up over time, allow our developers to get used to the process, allow the whole studio to kind of get behind it and see the benefits, and then layer on another aspect. And I think that's, again, the way that we approach things across all aspects of our studio is every time we add something, you know, we sort of reflect back on that, we see how it's working, and then we look for more opportunities to improve our overall process as well. So you can build it up in a very iterative and modular way. But I guess, you know, fundamentally, you know, it does take you kind of crossing this boundary. You know, when you can be hard when you're a small team, especially, to hire somebody full time to be a QA tester. You know, because you have that voice in the back of your mind that says we can't afford to have a person, you know, just testing the games full time. And again, you know, when that person comes in, there's that potential for animosity there. but it's certainly worth it because you don't really realise until you have that separate test team there just how much time you can be wasting with your developers doing their own testing, how much time you waste, and how much potential value you lose by pushing out a game that hasn't been optimally tested, that has bugs. You see it all the time on the App Store, for example, where these great games come out, but for whatever reason, they don't work on 3GS or the 3GS phone, and suddenly there's people posting all these one-star reviews, and as many people in this room will know, sometimes you only get one shot at it. So you need to make sure that first build that goes out is as clean as possible, and that it at least works on all of the phones or on the platforms that you're intending. So that's it, I think. Questions? Yes. So they have been co-located in the past, but we have a separate user experience expert. We had initially somebody who had kind of come through usability training at college and had done usability testing for commercial software and websites. After he moved on, we actually promoted, cross-promoted somebody from the QA department into that user experience role, and actually found that there was an even greater level of quality that we were getting out of that, because he had already had a sense for that kind of QA process as well. So we just have one person that runs it. Generally, we're doing about one usability test a week, so we'll bring in 5 or 6 consumers, and we'll sort of rotate what games we're working on. We have a pretty simple setup. We create this sort of living room environment where we have a couch and TV with consoles and a PC, a few cheap IP cameras that we have, and we just hook those into the network so people can stream the video live, video and audio live, and watch it in a different part of the office. It's normally good to keep the developers on somewhere very far away initially, because sometimes it can be frustrating when you're watching a test, in real time. And there was one issue we had with GripShift actually, where this guy was kind of talking aloud and was trying to create his own tracks in the track editor that we made, and he wanted to do something, and the help that he was looking for was in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, and he was kind of frustrated that he couldn't do what he wanted to do for 10 minutes. And eventually, you have to get to the point where you're sort of like, you have to move on to the next issue, right? So the user experience expert was like, do you see anything on the screen at all that might help you? And he's like, well, yeah, but I don't want to have to read that. So it can be difficult for developers to see that. So these tests happen in isolation, but they're recorded to either be watched live and or reviewed back. Our user experience expert will create a report and prioritize the issues. Have a questionnaire at the end, and the development team looks forward to that report coming out, because it helps them validate the work that they've done, or it helps them identify opportunities to make the game better for consumers. So it's definitely something to consider. We've actually started over the last 2 or 3 years started doing usability testing for other developers as well, just to kind of get them started on that process where they might not want to spend on that infrastructure up front, and we've just found developers that we work with doing that have had really good results. Yeah, I think that kind of comes back to what I said before. The developers, and it's all of them, right? It's the programmers and the UI artist and the audio guy, and nobody wants to show their stuff too early, because they get the sense that they're being judged. And early on, there was this kind of pressure to hold back, and it's like, oh, we'll wait for next week's build or next week's build, and we just want to fix this stuff up. You can actually start usability testing on paper. Once, from something as simple as the game flow or the UI designs or something like that, you can usability test those designs and work from paper or cardboard and test out mechanics that way. So you don't even have to wait for a build. The most important things I think that you need to watch out for are stability. Like, you don't want the game crashing a lot, because that makes it hard to really gauge what the experience is when you have that sort of issue in there. But outside of that, if you have rough graphics, placeholder stuff, it doesn't really matter, and consumers will comment on that, but you work out what you're supposed to be listening to and paying attention to, because it's not focus testing, so it's not about what they like or don't like. It's about the stuff that they're not even really thinking about, which is, do I even know what I'm doing? So yeah, once you get past that barrier from the development team, you test as much as you can on any build that works, pretty much. Yes. Yes, so one of the key distinctions that, or key changes that we made was we used to have this sort of separate QA team, and we did have, we would assign a QA person to be the QA lead for a particular project. They'd be sort of responsible for that project, but they were kind of separate from the development process in a way. So again, that just created this email chain back and forth, or if you end up kind of effectively talking through the task management software, where and you can end up with situations like a bug gets created and then the developer will say closed, will not fix, and then it gets reopened because of some other issue, and you don't want to end up talking through the task management software. What we've found that works really well is actually embedding a QA person on the actual development team and co-located with the team. The development resource ends up using that QA person a lot more effectively, just as an ad hoc test person. So again, you make sure that they're basically trying to optimize their time by making sure that they do as much development and they leave the verification to the person whose job it is. But it just creates this much more open dialogue, this much more sense of community. Everybody's on the same project, working together. That person actually participates in the Scrum meetings in the mornings as well. So as the developers are talking about their particular issues, the QA person will be talking about their things and what's stopping them from doing their job properly, and what are the key issues that they see in their mind as well. So you have this voice of QA that's right there and present with the QA team, and it's not just an arbitrary list somewhere that somebody else has control over. It's part of that process. So that's been really powerful for us. And we've been doing that from, I'd say, pre-alpha is when we've been, to use a console term, so maybe about halfway into the project we co-locate that person in. Maybe the case that from here on in, because we've found it's been working really well, that we have that person on the team from the outset, or at least when builds start happening. But yeah, it's just been really powerful having that voice within, co-located in the meetings, having their say alongside everyone else. Yeah, I mean, something about the way that we work as a studio is that we co-locate everybody who's on a project more or less into the same place. So we kind of sit artists and programmers all next to each other, and again that just creates this opportunity for open dialogue. It means everybody's on the same team. What it does mean when we're working on a lot of download projects and mobile projects is that people move around a lot. So we have we've had a very good process now for being able to move sort of 50 people in a day around the office. And I think the last time we restructured the whole studio, we shifted, I think it was 90 people in under 2 hours, and everybody was like all set up again. So people sort of come together, they form these project teams, but they don't get attached to their location. They don't particularly get attached to their team because they know that they'll be reassembled into another group later on. How are we doing for time there, Ben? About there? Okay, well, if anybody wants to talk about any of that stuff, will contact me later on. Either come and get a business card or write down the information up there. And I'm pretty terrible at answering email, but yeah. So thanks for that.